Today I'm here to talk to you about ways that we can grow our gifted students. So here at Dayton, we've seen an alarming trend of our gifted and talented students really falling to the middle of the pack instead of exceeding and growing and reaching the potential that we know they're capable of. So this year I really took on how do we engage those students? How do we get them excited about learning again? I tackled that from the reading and language arts perspective for 7th and 8th grade students with the help of Mr. Hellman. He kind of worked with me to work with those 7th grade students. And I started with 3 very essential questions. The first of those was, how can teachers reach gifted students in the mixed ability classroom? It's very difficult for most of us because we don't have a classroom that's just gifted. We have classrooms that are full of students from all ability levels, from IEP students all the way up to gifted students, sometimes in the exact same classroom. So how do we really differentiate to meet the needs of those students? My second question was, what strategies work to engage those top tier students without them feeling punished? We don't want them to feel like, oh, we have to do extra work because we're smart. That's not fair. They're all about things being fair. So really figuring out what can we do with those students so that they don't feel like it's extra, it's just different, which is fine. And then I also wanted to know what training is needed and what do we already have available for teachers to help them implement these strategies in their classrooms. A lot of things are already available here at the school and teachers aren't aware of them. And then there's some things that we really need to do a better job of training our teachers on so that they are better prepared to meet the needs of these students. Now, the purpose of this, as I just stated before, is to really help these high-end students from falling to the middle of the pack. These are the students who should be our next doctors, lawyers, politicians, whatever it is they want to do. And instead we're seeing them, not really achieve, in some cases even drop out because they're just bored, they're not challenged, whatever the case may be. So, we need to find ways to do that. The second purpose is to determine meaningful and engaging ways to challenge these students within a mixed ability classroom. Nature of the beast is we're not going to get an entirely gifted and talented classroom. That would be perfect. That would be great. Wouldn't it be wonderful? But reality says that's just not the way things work. And nor should it. It's nice. I think it's good for those students to see, all ability levels. The third purpose is to examine the effectiveness of various strategies in a classroom setting. So, how well do some of these strategies work in a classroom? It's really great to hypothesize and say, oh, this is a great idea, but what's it really look like at the end of the day? Does it really work? And then also to provide training and support for teachers and staff members. So many of us want to differentiate for these students. We want to help them. We want to, help them reach their full potential, but many of us just don't know how to do it. What's that look like in a classroom? How do I do that when I've got 32 kids and they're all over the map? What does that look like? So really working on training and supporting teachers so that they can better meet the needs of these students. So I went to Ms. Newsom at the beginning of this project, and I just wanted to know what am I looking at? We all have honors classes, and we know, in most grade levels there's 23, 24 honors classes, but how many of those students are truly labeled as gifted and talented? And so these were the numbers that I came up with in each grade level. So as you can see, 7th grade has 13, 8th grade has 11, 9th 10, 10th 15, 11th 12, and 12th 6. So it doesn't seem like, why are we focusing on this small number of students? And I think the answer is, if these students are allowed to grow, I think everyone else will follow. We've seen this stigma over the years, it's not cool to be smart. And so some of these kids don't want to be the smart kid because it's nerdy or, their friends will make fun of them. And so, if we can get these top, 10% of the students in each grade to really see the value in achieving and in doing better, the other students will follow and say, oh, this is really cool. And if you're using these strategies to help these students, ideally those same strategies will also grow your lower students as well. So everyone, instead of kind of falling to the middle, everyone's going to move up, which helps, which is a win-win, especially in a school like ours where we're in priority status. We're trying to, raise test scores and, get out from under the state and really show that these kids are able to achieve, because we've seen it. We know they can. They just sometimes don't perform on the tests. So this is a little hard to read, but you have it in your packets that I gave you. And these are just our CERT scores by grade level. And so the green is the kids who met the benchmark. They met it. They were where they needed to be. Now, your red are the students who were below benchmark, and this is for our English test. Okay, and if you can see this little tiny bit of gray, those are the numbers that were above the benchmark. And so you can see, like, this is not It's not great. We've got way too much red in here. And you're not even getting your average number of students who are gifted and talented who are meeting or exceeding the benchmark in some grade levels. You know, in the 12th grade, you've only got, I think, 4 students who met or exceeded, and we have 6 gifted and talented. And who knows if those are even the students. So after looking at the results by student, only 75% of our gifted and talented students were at or above the benchmark in English. So there's 25% that are falling below. And in 12th grade, as I said before, there were only 4 students in the entire grade who were at or above benchmark. And all of those weren't even labeled gifted and talented. So really not even half of our gifted and talented students in 12th grade are meeting the benchmarks they need to. Now, on a positive note, the best performance in the school by far was the 10th grade students, where 92% of our gifted and talented students were at or above benchmark. So most of them are performing as expected. But obviously, we're looking at these gifted students, and they should be performing above the benchmark in most cases. And so we still want to find ways to push them up and push them above that benchmark threshold. Now, looking at reading scores. And again, we're looking at CERT scores, the CERT that they took in the fall of this year. And again, same thing. You can see the red is below benchmark, gray is at benchmark, and green is above. And you can see in the 12th grade, not a single student met the benchmark in reading. These are the kids that are getting ready to go to college. They're supposed to be college and career ready, and yet they are not meeting a benchmark on a test that's a college level test. That's highly concerning, and something that we really need to be concerned about moving forward is how do we get these students college and career ready, and also get them out of this red area and performing to the ability so that they can be successful moving forward when they leave here and they graduate. So again, after looking at these results, even more dismal, by student, only 60% of the gifted and talented students were at or above benchmark in reading. So again, we're not seeing high gains, we're not seeing those students really exceeding and meeting the bar. And again, like I said before, in the 12th grade, not a single student even met the benchmark, much less exceeded it. It's scary. Like I said, these guys are going to KU next year, Gateway, UK, all of these places, and they're not hitting the benchmarks. And again, positive, the best performance was in the 10th grade, where over 50% of the grade were at or above benchmark. That's grade-wide, so that's not even looking at gifted and talented. Over 50% of the entire grade. I think you can look at that and really look back at previous interventions we've been doing with reading over the last few years, and I think you're really starting to see some of those gains and see some of that work come to fruition, and those students are doing so much better. And then all 10th grade gifted and talented students were at or above benchmark. So all of those 10th grade gifted and talented students in reading really met or exceeded the benchmarks that we'd set for them. And then again, in the 8th grade, less than 50% of our gifted and talented students met benchmark. So these are worrisome. This is what I'm talking about, where we're talking about the kids kind of falling to the middle. And how do we fix that? So in preparing for my work, what I wanted to do, I wanted to survey the teachers. So, you know, some of you may have been a part of that. And so I surveyed the teacher, and here you all probably remember answering these questions. You know, the first one, I am fully prepared to differentiate and meet the needs of all students in my classroom. And you can see, and I think most of us, I would even say, I don't know that I'm ready to meet the needs of all students. I think I'm better than I was, but it's an ongoing challenge. I understand how to conduct project-based learning in my class. That's kind of one of my focuses is project-based learning. It's a very easy way to differentiate, but how do you do that? And 6 of you felt like you could do that strongly, but we have 35 teachers. That's a really low percentage. I can conduct and lead lessons using the shared inquiry method. Again, another initiative that I've really tried to kind of start in my classrooms and in Mr. Hellman's classroom, and I know Mr. Riedmeier's using it up at the high school. But how do we get those students more engaged and get them into the lessons and get them talking? I believe that all students are appropriately challenged in my classes. Only 9 felt that way. So we really need to look at our curriculum and find out where are we failing these students, where are we going wrong, that we're not challenging these students. And then the final one, I'm comfortable allowing students to have more choice in my class. And that's hard, you know, relinquishing that control in classrooms. And only 7 of you felt comfortable with that. And I think that's hard even for me to give up that control, but it's something we need to learn how to do. Allow the students to learn. I'm going to show you a video later where a student's going to talk about, you know, the importance of being able to do things, and we'll kind of see more about that in a moment. Next, I gave all the students in the school a survey, at least the vast majority. And here are some of the results, which I found really interesting. And so the first one, again, kind of mirrored what I asked the teachers. says, I am challenged in my current classes by my teachers, and only 91 agreed, whereas 271 students disagreed. And this is school-wide. This isn't just your gifted students. Your students are saying, it's not hard enough. I'm not being appropriately challenged. They're up to the challenge. We just have to give them the work. The next one was, my teacher changes the lessons in class based on student ability. Only 52 believe that's true. Now, do they really understand what that means? Because you also see 10 were like, I don't know, they didn't give an answer. And then 300 were like, no, that doesn't happen. And I think they're seeing very often it's lecture, give a quiz, give a test, did you get it? Yes or no. And so they're not really seeing any difference between how they learn and how somebody else learns. My teacher understands the needs of all students in his or her classroom. Only 85 students agreed with that. So, they're not feeling like their teachers even understand what they need in the classrooms. And the one I really focused on was, I would enjoy having more choice in my classrooms. And 321 students out of 362 said, yes, please, give me more choice. The kids really will thrive when you give them the opportunity to make a choice in what they're doing. And then finally, I would enjoy a class where students were more active in discussions. This one was a little bit more mixed. I think a lot of students are afraid of discussion. They're afraid to talk. They're afraid to let their opinions be known, for fear of being made fun of, which is where we as teachers have to give them a safe environment to do that. So, only 101 agreed with that. But I think that if we show them that there's a safe environment, that number would go up. So, if you look at the research, so I've done a lot of research on this, looking at, what are the best methods, what are the best ways to reach these students. And the research states, independent study, student choice, and connections to real-world experiences cause students to take more ownership of their work. It causes them to do better work. Boredom, we know this. Boredom leads to lack of effort and motivation. We see those students who are bored and they don't want to work and they don't want to be a part of anything, and that's because they're bored. And then it says, studies show that low-income schools, it is often, as I said before, not cool to be smart. But we've got to encourage those gifted students to follow their passions and choose to be the leaders in the school and show people it is cool to be smart. It's okay, you can be the smart kid. And then finally, integrating depth and complexity in the classroom increases engagement and achievement and students of all ability levels. So that's where I say, yes, I'm focusing on gifted and talented students, but ideally, in these mixed ability classrooms, we should see gains at students of all levels, where everyone rises to the occasion, so to speak, and is really coming up to meet the needs and meet the benchmarks. So you should, in these classes, see everyone grow. Now, this is a student on TED Talks who was talking about challenges within the learning environment. I'm not going to show you all of this video, but I will show you a portion of it.
Now, I wanted to start with a question. When was the last time you were called childish? For kids like me, being called childish can be a frequent occurrence. Every time we make irrational demands, exhibit irresponsible behavior, or display any other signs of being normal American citizens, we are called childish. Which really bothers me. After all, take a look at these events. Imperialism and colonization, world wars, George W. Bush. Ask yourself, who's responsible? Adults. Now, what have kids done? Well, Anne Frank touched millions with her powerful account of the Holocaust. Ruby Bridges helped to end segregation in the United States. And most recently, Charlie Simpson helped to raise 120,000 pounds for Haiti on his little bike. So as you can see evidenced by such examples, age has absolutely nothing to do with it. The traits the word childish addresses are seen so often in adults that we should abolish this age discriminatory word when it comes to criticizing behavior associated with irresponsibility and irrational thinking. Thank you. Then again, who's to say that certain types of irrational thinking aren't exactly what the world needs? Maybe you've had grand plans before, but stopped yourself thinking, that's impossible, or that costs too much, or that won't benefit me. For better or worse, we kids aren't hampered as much when it comes to thinking about reasons why not to do things. Kids can be full of inspiring aspirations and hopeful thinking, like my wish that no one went hungry or that everything were free, kind of utopia. How many of you still dream like that and believe in the possibilities? Sometimes a knowledge of history and the past failures of utopian ideals can be a burden, because you know that if everything were free, then the food stocks would become depleted and scarce and lead to chaos. On the other hand, we kids still dream about perfection. And that's a good thing, because in order to make anything a reality, you have to dream about it first. In many ways, our audacity to imagine helps push the boundaries of possibility. For instance, the Museum of Glass in Tacoma, Washington, my home state, Washington, has a program called Kids Design Glass, and kids draw their own ideas for glass art. Now, the resident artist said that they got some of their best ideas from the program because kids don't think about the limitations of how hard it can be to blow glass in a certain shape, they just think of good ideas. Now, when you think of glass, you might think of colorful Chihuly designs or maybe Italian vases, but kids challenge glass artists to go beyond that, into the realm of broken-hearted snakes and bacon boys, who you can see as meat vision. Now, our inherent wisdom doesn't have to be insider's knowledge. Kids already do a lot of learning from adults, and we have a lot to share. I think that adults should start learning from kids. Now, I do most of my speaking in front of an education crowd, teachers and students, and I like this analogy. It shouldn't just be a teacher at the head of the classroom telling students, do this, do that. The students should teach their teachers. Learning between grown-ups and kids should be reciprocal. The reality, unfortunately, is a little different, and it has a lot to do with trust, or a lack of it. Now, if you don't trust someone, you place restrictions on them, right? If I doubt my older sister's ability to pay back the 10% interest I established on her last loan, I'm going to withhold her ability to get more money from me until she pays it back. True story, by the way. Now, adults seem to have a prevalently restrictive attitude towards kids, from every don't do that, don't do this in the school handbook, to restrictions on school internet use. As history points out, regimes become oppressive when they're fearful about keeping control. And although adults may not be quite at the level of totalitarian regimes, kids have no or very little say in making the rules, when really the attitude should be reciprocal, meaning that the adult population should learn and take into account the wishes of the younger population. Now, what's even worse than restriction is that adults often underestimate kids' abilities. We love challenges, but when expectations are low, trust me, we will sink to them. My own parents had anything but low expectations for me and my sister. Okay, so they didn't tell us to become doctors or lawyers or anything like that, but my dad did read to us about Aristotle and pioneer germ fighters, when lots of other kids were hearing the wheels on the bus go round and round. Well, we heard that one too, but pioneer germ fighters totally rules. I love to write from the age of 4, and when I was 6, my mom bought me my own laptop equipped with Microsoft Word. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to stop it there. So, I show you this because this is a little girl, I believe she's 10 or 12, talking about how adults need to learn from children. We need to allow them choices and allow them to, allow us to work with them rather than just seeing ourselves as the experts and they need to listen to us because we're the adults. And so that's really where I kind of base everything in my activities in my classroom. I really wanted to kind of tailor everything around that idea that the kids learn. So the approach I used, I worked in 7th and 8th grade language arts classes. Again, I worked very closely with Mr. Hellman. He didn't really have a choice. I was his K-tip person. He was kind of stuck with me. But he was very kind enough to really say, okay, I'll take on this challenge. We used a mix of project-based learning methods and shared inquiry methods. The idea is, they need a little bit of both. The shared inquiry gets them more comfortable with discussion techniques and really sharing out in the classroom. And the project-based learning allows them to take some ownership and really have some choice in the classroom and work at a level that works for them. Achieve higher, have those chances. We did, however, work with the honors classes to better meet the needs of the students labeled as gifted. So I did not work with every single class. They were kind of my guinea pigs is what I told them all year, which they totally owned. And then same thing, I worked with the 7th grade teacher, Mr. Hellman, to ensure that the methods worked at other grade levels when training other teachers. So I would have loved to have trained other content as well, but I didn't get that opportunity this year. But it was still really nice to see, does this work across grade levels? Can we do this? I would have loved to have done high school as well. Hopefully in the future we can find ways to implement that. Now why? So again, just like that little girl said in the TED Talks video, it makes learning relevant. When the kids are learning something they want to learn, they're in it. They love it. They want to do it. It allows them to tackle real world issues. So it allows them to look at, what do I want to learn? What do I want to figure out? And how am I going to figure it out? How am I going to get the problem? Learning becomes individualized for each student. Each student can really decide, how am I going to go about this? What's this project going to look like? They're more engaged because they're owning it. Again, it's all about this ownership. And there's more effort put into projects. The projects that my students did that were project-based, they were so much better than the ones that I dictated and said, you must do it this way. And they took so much more ownership and pride in their work. They were excited. Look at this, Ms. Hawkins, look what I just did. And they were super excited. And again, the students are doing the work, which means the students are doing the learning. I had a mentor several years ago that said, the person doing the talking is the person doing the learning. And how many of us stand up in front of a classroom, like I'm doing with you right now, sorry, and say, okay, class, listen to me, let's look at these lectures, and we talk, and then we expect them to write their notes, and then we want them to take a test next week. Well, I've done all the talking, so I've learned it, I got it, I'm good. And little Johnny's sitting in the back row like, I got nothing, I checked out halfway through. So if they're doing the work, they're doing the learning. So we want to make sure we minimize the amount of time we're doing the talking and have the students do the work. Now, here are our results on the spring cert. So after we did this, so we worked on this for the bulk of the winter and spring. And so 18 of 21 students in the test class were now at or above benchmark in English. All gifted and talented students met or exceeded the English benchmark. And 16 of 21 students met or exceeded the reading benchmark. And all but one gifted and talented student met or exceeded the reading benchmark. So we saw these wonderful gains and these students really growing in these areas, which was awesome. 7th grade, very similar. 16 or 24 met or exceeded, and you have this in your packet, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time. And all of the gifted and talented students met or exceeded the benchmark. Look back at those previous pages and what growth we saw from that. 18 of 24 met or exceeded the benchmark in reading, and all of them met the benchmark in reading. So great, tremendous growth through these methods. So next steps. Obviously, more teacher training in all content areas. It was great to work on language arts because that's what I know, but I want to figure out ways to implement this in math and science and social studies because it can be done. I want to create teacher leaders and teacher experts in both project-based learning and inquiry to work with the PLCs and work with them to process through the work. So, creating someone that's like an expert. And co-teach with these teachers. Some of us just don't know what to do, and we just need somebody to just kind of hold our hand and say, here's what it looks like, and then we're good. And then increase training on differentiation for students of all ability levels to really increase achievement district-wide, not just with the gifted students, but with your, IEP students, with your middle-of-the-road students, to really, make sure that they're all given an opportunity to achieve at high levels. I know I went through all that really, really quickly, and it's a lot of data, but you have your handout in front of you that I gave you with the slides. Does anyone have any questions? Thank you. I appreciate your time.